manager, and they say a search for a successor begins immediately to take that position over full-time for Pete Rose. Speaking of which, the Rose saga took an unexpected twist this morning. Without a doubt, Rose suddenly submitting to a suspension by Baseball Commissioner Bartlett Giamatti. The suspension is for life, but with reinstatement possible after just 1 year. Now, Giamatti still maintains Rose is guilty of betting on baseball. Rose insists he is not. Hearing the two at the respective news conferences, one wonders how they ever came to an agreement in the first place.
In the absence of a hearing, and therefore in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, I am confronted by the factual record of Mr. Dowd, and on the basis of that, yes, I have concluded that he bet on baseball.
I've made some mistakes, and I think I'm being punished for those mistakes. However, the settlement is fair, especially the wording that says that they will they have no finding that I bet on baseball. It's something I told the commissioner back in February, and it's something that I've told you people the last 4 months.
Today was without a doubt a dark day for baseball. The game has withstood similar scandals, however, and worse. The saddest thought I have concerning the Rose saga involves the man himself. Pete Rose has a gambling problem. Like alcohol and drugs, it's an addiction that can ruin your life. Now, it's clear, despite Rose's allegations to the contrary, that his gambling habit is way out of control. It has now cost him the thing dearest to him, baseball. Still, he refuses to admit he has a gambling addiction, and with his macho proudly held high, he refuses to bend. Certainly, a man of Rose's stature can be expected to walk a straight line and be above the law. Rose has not, and in my mind, unless he seeks rehabilitation, his suspension from the sport should not be reinstated. Well, turning to football.
He never bet on baseball, and he told reporters he plans to apply for reinstatement next year. We'd like to show you some more of Rose's news conference on the record.
As you can imagine, this is a very sad day. You know, I've been in baseball 3 decades, and to think that I'm going to be out of baseball for a very short period of time hurts. And I'd like to apologize for this controversy lingering on into the '89 season. I hope it didn't distract from the championship season of the 12 teams in the National League, and I hope it didn't distract from the All-Star game, and I know now it won't distract from the upcoming playoffs and the showcase of baseball, the World Series. I've made some mistakes, and I think I'm being punished for those mistakes. However, the settlement is fair, especially the wording that says that they will they have no finding that I bet on baseball. It's something I told the commissioner back in February, and it's something that I've told you people the last 4 months. My only regret up to this time is I will not have the opportunity to tell my side of the story. However, I will add that I will tell my side of the story in the very near future.
Pete Rose on his lifetime suspension from organized baseball on the record. Joining us now on the line to talk about Pete Rose is the national correspondent for Sporting News, the newspaper described as the Bible of baseball. Dave Nightingale is in St. Louis, Missouri. Mr. Nightingale, why did Rose deny it? Why did he deny that he had bet on baseball?
Well, the one thing in the so-called settlement, Ellison, is that it isn't in writing that he did. The point of the fact is that if there wasn't a settlement, we're dealing with a matter of semantics here. The first thing is that baseball suspended Pete Rose for life, period. That's the settlement, if you want to use that word, is such that the terms of the suspension did not include the phrase, he bet on baseball. There were enough other reasons from the Dowd report that the Baseball Commissioner's Office commissioned, and for consorting with known gamblers, which Rose has not denied, and that in itself was enough to suspend him for life. the commissioner let him save face a little by not forcing the issue, not insisting that he did bet on baseball per se in the terms of the suspension. The commissioner did say it in actuality that he still thinks that Rose bet on baseball.
What kind of guy is Rose that he would allow that to go ahead and at the same time maintain that he didn't bet on it? What kind of a guy is he?
Well, he's not really very smart in this case, I don't think. See, the public perception in the United States is that he's guilty because he didn't attempt to fight this. But the actuality is that the preponderance of evidence, the fact that the court system very likely would have thrown it back to the commissioner's office rather than taking it over itself, that he couldn't get a friendly hometown court, that if it was settled in courts rather than out of the commissioner's office, that it would be settled in a federal court, which traditionally has supported the right of baseball to self-govern.
What chances does he have of actually getting back into the game the way he says he wants to?
About as much chance as I have of swimming Hudson Bay.
You don't think it's going to happen? I
think that he will that he will apply next year and be rejected. I think that in his mind, Pete still thinks that he is Pete Rose, that he's a little bit above the common man, and that he might have a pass back into baseball. I think he's deluding himself. I think that this thing it's not going to turn around in the near future. What's this going to do for the game of baseball? There have been stories like this before. Well, I think very little. I think that if you really want to come down to it, I think that some of the athletes' drug use has probably did more to damage baseball's image than gambling, because more people gamble and use drugs, and we tend to empathize in that respect. Baseball, Ellison, is a marvelous game in that it has tried for over 100 years to self-destruct, and it's incapable of it. It's still going on and drawing more people every year, and I think that the Pete Rose story will be swallowed up by the news of 4 good pennant races in the next 3-4 weeks.
And I'm sure you'll always be a fan. Thanks very much for talking to us.
Okay, thank you, Ellison.
We've just learned the Cincinnati Reds have named an interim manager to replace Pete Rose. He's Tommy Helms, a coach for the team. Helms managed the Reds for 1 month last year when Rose was suspended for bumping an umpire. We'll have more on this day after this break.
Team. We begin our coverage with Ken Daniels at the Sky Dome.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Certainly no one man is bigger than the game of baseball, and the Jays and the Tigers will play a game here tonight. But of course, everybody is talking about the Pete Rose situation, and they will be talking about it long after the first pitch this evening, because for the first time since the age of 7, Pete Rose is out of uniform. Now, Rose has yet to admit that he bet on baseball games or on the Reds, but Pete Rose has reached agreement with Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti. And in the absence of a hearing, Giamatti concluded that, yes, Pete Rose did bet on baseball, he did bet on his team, and Giamatti has banned Pete Rose for life.
The banishment comes 6 months and 4 days after Bart Giamatti first ordered Pete Rose to travel to New York to answer to gambling allegations. Rose has been banned for life for betting on the game.
The banishment for life of Pete Rose from baseball is the sad end of a sorry episode. One of the game's greatest players has engaged in a variety of acts which have stained the game, and he must now live with the consequences of those acts. By choosing not to come to a hearing before me, and by choosing not to proffer any testimony or evidence contrary to the evidence and information contained in the report of the Special Counsel to the Commissioner, Mr. Rose has accepted baseball's ultimate sanction, his lifetime ineligibility.
After 1 year has passed, Rose may apply for reinstatement, but only if he doesn't challenge this banishment in court.
As you can imagine, this is a very sad day. You know, I've been in baseball 3 decades, and to think that I'm going to be out of baseball for a very short period of time hurts.
And to Giamatti, there is no doubt Rose bet on baseball.
And therefore, in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, I am confronted by the factual record of Mr. Dowd, and on the basis of that, yes, I have concluded that he bet on baseball.
Well, regardless of what the commissioner says today, I did not bet on baseball.
And Pete Rose says somewhere down the road he will tell his side of this sordid story, but baseball has been Pete Rose's life since the age of 7.
My life is baseball. I hope to get back into baseball as soon as I possibly can. Looking forward to that. Matter of fact, I've never looked forward to a birthday like I'm looking forward to my new daughter's birthday, because 2 days after that is when I can apply for reinstatement.
Pete Rose is the game's all-time greatest hitter. He always played to win, even in spring training. He earned the nickname Charlie Hustle. But last night, Hustle was linked to what he was doing just hours after signing the agreement with the commissioner, selling his old memorabilia.
Hey, thanks for signing these tonight. That's a pleasure. Yeah. You can read my name. Yeah, you got an easy one.
Technically, sir, as soon as Mr. Rose had signed this document, Mr. Rose was no longer employed or employable in baseball. Mr. Rose was there at a free citizen on the permanently ineligible list.
But will Pete Rose reach the hallowed hall? Some 68 years ago, the ban on shoeless Joe Jackson included his Hall of Fame candidacy. But as for Pete Rose, Giamatti has left that up to the voters.
I know I need not point out to the baseball writers of America that it is their responsibility who decides who goes into the Hall of Fame. It is not mine.
I did my part to get into the Hall of Fame. It's up to you people who do the voting. I got all the hits and scored all the runs and won all the games.
Pete Rose, that you did. Now, one man who knows Pete Rose perhaps better than anybody else is his former manager when he was with the Cincinnati Reds, Sparky Anderson. Sparky in town today, of course, with the Detroit Tigers. Earlier today, Sparky asked about the suspension and about his friend, Pete Rose. Either way, certainly a sad day for Sparky.
He's the greatest single competitor I ever managed. I will never manage another player in my lifetime again as competitive as him, as strong-willed as him, and as tough as him. He has that great thing that he can recover quicker than any man I ever seen. I've seen him where he's sick. He played. I've seen him when he was hurt so bad that sometimes the blood vessels in his arm one time was holding. I've seen him when he was hurt so bad that sometimes the blood vessels in his arm one time was whole arm was black and blue where he hit the mound sliding to get a ball. That didn't bother him. He played. We were going to Pittsburgh the next day, and I felt that he would be out the whole series. He said, I won't miss a day. Don't worry about it. He missed 8 games for me in 9 years. I think the people have to know that got to see him play, that they got to see one of the greats of our time and one of the greats probably in 100 and some years of baseball.
And really, you can't argue with that. But with all the attention on baseball's banishment of Pete Rose, perhaps one very important issue is being lost in the shuffle, because Rose has been accused of having a serious gambling addiction, though he has not admitted to it, and experts say the problem will not disappear without treatment. Steve Paikin has more.
Pete, do you believe you have a gambling problem of any sort, and if so, will you seek any sort of rehabilitation for it?
I don't think I have a gambling problem at all. So consequently, I won't seek any help of any kind.
That was the last thing compulsive gambling experts wanted to hear from Pete Rose. What they hoped for was some recognition from Rose that he has a debilitating disease, that he needs treatment.
He is in the grip of this illness.
Tibor Barsoni is with the Canadian Foundation on Compulsive Gambling. He's been studying the Rose affair since it became public.
Unless he gets treatment in a year from now or 2 years from now, he will be worse than today, and unfortunately will be a great loss to professional baseball.
Pete Rose said at his news conference this morning, I don't think I have a gambling problem, and I'm not going to seek treatment. Do you think he has a gambling problem?
He is suffering from this medically recognized illness, being a pathological gambler.
Even the baseball commissioner today urged Rose to seek treatment.
Confident steps towards rehabilitation, it seems to me, ought to be taken in a direction that has not been the direction hitherto taken.
Experts say pro athletes are no more or no less susceptible to the disastrous effects of compulsive gambling than anyone else. But athletes certainly are the most prominent victims. Former pro quarterback Art Schlichter lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to bookies before organized football gave up on him. The Foundation on Compulsive Gambling estimates 500,000 Canadians suffer from a pathological addiction to gambling, and the results are often heartbreaking. Families and relationships break up. Gamblers sink deeper into the criminal world, and they cost the economy millions of dollars in lost productivity. Pete Rose, of course, hopes to be back in baseball next year. But gambling experts here say that unless Rose seeks treatment for his affliction, his condition will continue to deteriorate and he will never again return to the game he loves. Steve Paikin, CBC News, Toronto.
Now the Cincinnati Reds are trying to clean up their house. They have late this afternoon named a successor to Pete Rose. It is Tommy Helm, the longtime coach of the Cincinnati Reds. He will take over managerial duties. We'll be back with a lot more on this story and a Blue Jays trade as a familiar name returns to town. We'll be back later.
He played in all-star games. He earned millions of dollars and millions of adoring fans. But Pete Rose has a problem. He loved to gamble on the game of baseball, and despite vehement denials, Rose was convicted by Baseball Today. Commissioner Bart Giamatti announced that Rose would be banned for life because of his gambling. So while the Cincinnati Reds have the day off, their manager has the rest of his career off. More from NBC's James Polk.
Pete Rose, out of uniform, out of the game, left arguing the call today.
I did not bet on baseball. I have too much respect for the game, too much love for the game.
Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti saw it differently.
I have concluded that he bet on baseball.
And on Rose's own team?
Yes.
The Cincinnati manager wore the Reds uniform in a game for the last time Monday. Baseball said Rose had agreed to accept a lifetime suspension for his gambling violations. Rose said he expects to be back as soon as he can apply for reinstatement after only 1 year.
My life is baseball. I hope to get back into baseball as soon as I possibly can.
Permanent ineligibility means lifetime banishment.
He said no one has ever been reinstated after a lifetime ban. From the start of the season until today, the man who has played in more games, got more hits than anyone in baseball, had refused to go quietly. But the evidence had become overwhelming. Betting slips in Rose's handwriting with Rose's fingerprints, listing bets on Reds games. Testimony from this bookie now in prison, and more troubles ahead. An income tax investigation still going on, not only on Rose's bets with bookies, but also his large winnings at this racetrack outside Cincinnati.
I have no comment on any of those situations. They're not important today.
The ban means Rose cannot work for a baseball club here at any job, manager, coach, or broadcaster. But he could still get into the Hall of Fame when sports writers vote in a couple of years.
I did my part to get into the Hall of Fame. I got all the hits and scored all the runs and won all the games.
I can't see him not being elected because I think most of our people will vote on his playing ability.
Giamatti said Rose leaves a stain on baseball.
Of course this hurt the game. There's no pleasure in any of this for any of us.
On this day in baseball, there is no joy in Mudville. James Polk, NBC News, New York.
I ripped up his baseball cards weeks ago. Now, reaction on today's lifetime ban was mixed. Many felt it was a dark day for baseball. Others, including myself, feel that Rose got just what he deserved. Rose's former manager, Sparky Anderson, had these comments.
He's the greatest single competitor I was ever around. There will never be another athlete that I'll ever coach in my lifetime that will ever compete with this man.
Do you think that this tarnishes him as a ball player and what he's done vis-a-vis the Hall of Fame?
No, I don't think this has anything to do with the Hall of Fame. I sure hope not.
So in other words, you think he should be in the Hall of Fame regardless of this incident?
I think the Hall of Fame says, what did you do as a player? And to me, if he don't have the credentials, then Nolan Ryan don't have the credentials. If Nolan Ryan makes the Hall of Fame, which I know he should and will, Pete Rose better be right there with it.
This 1 year should be permanent, I guess, if they find more facts about it and whatever. But it's a sad situation for all of baseball.
I think he had looked at the evidence here and sorted it all out and done what he thought was the right thing. And I'm firmly convinced he has done the right thing. I think it sustains his office. I think it sustains baseball. I think it sustains the integrity of the game. I think it sends a powerful message for the future that people better not be involved with gambling on this game.
It's just sad when you have someone of a caliber of a Pete Rose to be accused of some of these things that he's been accused of. Because, you know, you never, no matter how you look at it, the mark will always remain with you.
Meanwhile, the Blue Jays made a
29 years in the majors and over 4,000 hits. Pete Rose has been given the boot for betting on America's favorite pastime. He denies it. Unfortunately, the commissioner has got the goods.
One of the game's greatest players has engaged in a variety of acts which have stained the game, and he must now live with the consequences of those acts. By choosing not to come to a hearing before me, and by choosing not to proffer any testimony or evidence contrary to the evidence and information contained in the report of the special counsel to the commissioner, Mr. Rose has accepted baseball's ultimate sanction, which is lifetime ineligibility.
Well, regardless of what the commissioner said today, I did not bet on baseball. That's all I can say.
Based on what happened last night with the Blue Jays and the air show they put on, the talk around the batting cage should be about that game. Unfortunately, it is not. Just about everyone's discussing what happened to Pete Rose today.
Along with Sparky Anderson, who was Rose's manager for almost a decade, 4 members of the Jays organization have played against Charlie Hustle. Mookie Wilson, Lee Mazzilli, and manager Cito Gaston. Tom Lawless was dealt to the Expos from Cincinnati in October of '84. Going the other way, Pete Rose.
It's probably a sad day in baseball to see the best hitter in the game go down like that, but, you know, I guess...
I never seen a man that could turn on the crowd the way he...
Ahead on Sports Desk, the decision is in, and Pete Rose is out for life. The Green Riders hope Tom Burgess can stop the Lions, and a former Blue Jay is the newest Blue Jay. Sports Desk is brought to you by Canadian Airlines, across Canada, around the world.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Sports Desk. I'm Chris Seatons, along with my partner in crime, Michael Lansford. For the next half hour, we will update you on the story from a busy day in sports. The longest-running soap opera of the year has finally come to an end. Baseball Commissioner Bartlett Giamatti has ruled on the Pete Rose case. Michael.
Because a man can hit a baseball does not mean he is a good man. When we call a player one of the greatest of all time, we speak of greatness on the field, not off. Sometimes we forget that. It's tough to forget that now because Pete Rose, a man who is referred to as what the game's all about, has been banned for life from the game his name has been synonymous with for 3 decades. It's been obvious since John Dowd's report was made public that Pete Rose was going to get a lifetime suspension. But he's avoided the sentence through legal maneuvering. This morning, that being Thursday morning, he stopped avoiding the baseball commissioner and faced his punishment, a punishment that will keep him out of the game that he appeared born to play.
The banishment for life of Pete Rose from baseball is the sad end of a sorry episode. One of the game's greatest players has engaged in a variety of acts which have stained the game, and he must now live with the consequences of those acts. By choosing not to come to a hearing before me, and by choosing not to proffer any testimony or evidence contrary to the evidence and information contained in the report of the special counsel to the commissioner, Mr. Rose has accepted baseball's ultimate sanction, which is lifetime ineligibility.
It's a very sad day. You know, I've been in baseball 3 decades. And to think that I'm going to be out of baseball for a very short period of time hurts. And I'd like to apologize for this controversy lingering on into the '89 season.
Let no one think that it did not hurt baseball. That hurt will pass, however, as the great glory of the game asserts itself and a resilient institution goes forward. Let it also be clear that no individual is superior to the game.
I've made some mistakes, and I think I'm being punished for those mistakes. However, the settlement is fair, especially the wording that says that they will they have no finding that I bet on baseball. It's something I told the commissioner back in February, and it's something I've told you people the last 4 months. My only regret up to this time, as I will not have the opportunity to tell my side of the story. However, I will add that I will tell my side of the story in the very near future.
The story broke a day earlier, and the talk was a compromise agreement. It certainly doesn't seem to be much of a compromise for Rose. There is no death penalty, so you can't do worse than life. The only thing that Rose seems to have going is that the concentration is on his not presenting his side of the case rather than his gambling. He can appeal for a reinstatement after 1 year.
So what's the consensus amongst baseball's establishment? Well, we've pieced together a cross-section to give you a feel. If there's one sentiment that we keep hearing over and over again, it's that Rose got what he deserved. Everyone knows the rules, and those who break the rules pay the price.
I think Pete Rose was a great ball player who has blasphemized the very institution or business that built him. I think he has, in the words of another great coach, very dear to me, Earl Red Blake, he has to pay the price.
That is the main rule of all of baseball. If you break it, that's the situation. And this 1 year would just be, could be permanent, I guess, if they find more facts about it and whatever. But it's a sad situation for all of baseball.
What would you like to see happen?
I like Pete not bet on baseball. That's what I would love to have.
If he said he didn't bet on baseball, is he the type of person that you could believe to be telling the truth in that respect?
There's only two people that know that.
That is?
Pete and God.
In his own deposition, I've read the whole 2,000-page report now. In his own deposition, Pete admits that he has bet on a number of occasions with bookmakers. Football and basketball, he states. He constantly denies through the deposition he bet on baseball. But I'm telling you, you have to be deaf, dumb, and dead to believe that he didn't bet on baseball based upon all of the allegations within the 2,000 pages. There isn't a page of testimony that says he didn't. I mean, it's incredible. It's so voluminous. I mean, it's like this.
Just sad when you have someone of a caliber of a Pete Rose to be accused of some of these things that he's been accused of. Because, you know, you never, no matter how you look at it, the mark will always remain with you.
Well, I think a very heavy burden will lie on him. While it's true that he made a arrangement that he would not, the commissioner would not have a hearing and not have findings on the gambling question. Rose concedes that the commissioner had a factual basis for his decision. Everybody knows what the commissioner's investigation was all about. Under the circumstances, I think there'll be a very heavy burden on Rose to come in and try to persuade the commissioner that he ought to be reinstated.
The general public and everybody was getting very tired of hearing about the same thing. The outcome was a sad one, but it was something that the commissioner had to do to protect the sport.
The only thing I like to say is, when I heard the news last night, I had a chance to talk to my father, and, you know, when I talked to him, that's when I talked to you guys, so until then, I have nothing to say.
So you were shocked this morning at what happened and what happened last night? Nothing at all?
You know, as a reporter, there are places that you'd like to be and people you'd like to interview, but that's not one of them. I felt quite uncomfortable watching his son put in that position.
Yeah. You got to wonder also about Pete Rose's future now. What's going to happen to him? He can appeal, I guess, after a year. I heard some talk the other day about the possibility of him maybe going to manage in Japan. He's got some business interests there. There have been a number of former major leaguers who have gone on to play in Japan. Possibility he might move on.
Think back to what he said. He said, after having spent 3 decades in baseball, it's going to be tough to be out for a short period of time. He's obviously thinking that he's going to get back in. I don't think there's much chance of that. I think you'll see information, people now come out and tell stories about Pete Rose's gambling that we have yet to hear. I think that time is going to do him no justice. I think he's got a big problem there.
What about the chance maybe of a new commissioner coming in down the road and possibly having what happened with Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle being reinstated like Uberoth did?
I guess you can never tell, but their situations clearly were not necessarily breaking a rule, but kind of bending it a little bit. Rose broke it big time. This has, of course, taken its toll. This has, of course, taken its toll on the Cincinnati Reds. There's no way to measure how much the distraction has cost them, but surely it's substantial. Rose did the Reds no favor by dragging it out. Rose's job now belongs to Tommy Helms, who makes it clear this is no way to get a major league managing job.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say that this is a very, very sad day for me. If you're ever going to get a big league manager's job, this is no way to get it. But as Murray just said, baseball's going to go on. Pete Rose is a friend, a small business partner. I talked with him earlier today. He said, Tommy, if you get the job, I know you'll do a good job. And he was very favorable and things like that. People have been asking me all day about situation, how you're going to manage whatever and all that stuff. Well, I don't know. Pete Rose is going to be gone for at least a year, as we know that. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there instinctively and with my feelings and everything like that and just try to do a good job for Murray Cook and Marge Schatz because, you know, Cincinnati Reds is a great organization. I love the Reds. I just hope I can do a good job. I know I'll be monitored within the next 5 weeks. I got a good coaching staff. We'll just have to go see what happens.
Time for a quick break. Still to come on Sports Desk, the BC Lions.
Our news of the week, Pete Rose banished from baseball for life, a punishment in line with betting on baseball and betting on one's own team. Now, Rose accepted the agreement to avoid a messy court battle, and because in the agreement reached with Commissioner Bart Giamatti, there is no formal finding that he bet on baseball. Rose continues to deny his guilt, and when the agreement was announced on Thursday, it was clear that perceptions of reality were quite different.
I am confronted by the factual record of Mr. Dowd, and on the basis of that, yes, I have concluded that he bet on baseball.
Well, regardless of what the commissioner said today, I did not bet on baseball. That's all I can say.
The matter of Mr. Rose is now closed. It will be debated and discussed. Let no one think that it did not hurt baseball. That hurt will pass, however, as the great glory of the game asserts itself and the resilient institution goes forward. Let it also be clear that no individual is superior to the game.
That you would manage between...
A rather sad irony had the banished Rose huckstering baseball memorabilia this week on the Consumer Value Network. His fall from grace has aroused emotional response on many levels.
I always played the game like...
Pete, right now, I think more than anything, needs compassion and needs help. I think that he is not understanding the importance of what is going on to some extent. And it's hard to believe that after 6 months that could possibly be so.
We as players have to remember that we do not own the game. The game is passed along to each and every generation, and it's up to us as players to pass that along to the next generation in better shape than we found it. Willie Mays, Stan Musial, all the guys that preceded Johnny and myself, they passed the game along to us, and it was ours for a little while, and it's for us to pass it along to the next guys. I think Pete has broken that string.
He's the greatest single competitor I ever managed. I will never manage another player in my lifetime again as competitive as him, as strong-willed as him, and as tough as him.
As you know by now, Pete Rose can apply for reinstatement in 1 year. Some other quick Rose notes. He is under investigation by the IRS, and something should be coming down on that in the very near future. He is writing a book with Roger Kahn in which he will tell his story. And in the Reds offices on the outer wall, they have removed the picture there of Pete Rose, replaced it with a photo of owner Marge Schott and her dog Shotzi. When we were to Yankee Stadium, and joining me, the Orioles manager Frank Robinson. And Frank, I think very honestly I would be remiss if I didn't at least ask you to comment on what has happened to Pete Rose. I know you've been reticent to talk about it, but let me ask you.
Well, you can ask, Gail, but at this time I just feel like it's best for me to have no comment on the situation because, number one, we're in a pennant race, and I don't want to get involved in any controversy. And also, it's so many uncertainties in this case right now that things that I don't know about, things that are being said, things that are being denied, that I'd just rather not get into even trying to judge or make a decision on whether Pete Rose is innocent or not innocent.
Welcome back to Sportsline. The nightly installment of the pennant chase takes a back seat to something far more important this night. Baseball Commissioner Bartlett Giamatti passed away late this afternoon after suffering a massive heart attack at his summer home. He was found unconscious at his home and never regained consciousness. Just 8 days after suspending Pete Rose for life, Giamatti is dead at the age of 51. Some reaction from various baseball people on this sudden loss.
When you look at Bart Giamatti, you looked at a guy with a tremendous compassion for the game of baseball, a guy who really loved the game, that was probably more interested in what was happening on the field than what was happening off the field. You knew that he had the best interests of the players at heart. You knew he had the best interests of the fans at heart. You knew he had the best interests of the owners at heart. And from that point, he would be sorely missed by everybody, I think, involved in the game.
I guess the big question now is what happens.
Well, I don't know that one, and it's too early to even comment on that. I suppose that the most important thing to do right now is to know that baseball is still in good hands, because Bart Giamatti was a tremendous administrator. He brought in a chap by the name of Fay Vincent, who was his deputy commissioner, and I'm sure that he left everything in probably as good shape as anybody could expect it to be left in.
It's sad. I mean, all of baseball has to be sad today. Anyone struck down at that age, at such a young age, is, it's tragic.
I will say this, any other commissioner there's ever been or ever will be would be pale by comparison, because Bart Giamatti was a man who didn't just love being commissioner, he loved baseball. He cared more about the game of baseball than any man I've ever met.
I feel sorry that I opposed them, but those were my ideas, and I can't help that. But he was a wonderful man. You knew he's a guy who loved baseball. I mean, that came out every time you talked to him.
Bart Giamatti was a close friend of mine for many, many years. I do want to pay my respects. He was a great person. He loved the game of baseball, and in a short time made a real contribution to the game, standing for the highest possible ethical standards. And then, of course, his contribution to higher education in this country is well known. And on top of all that, he was a thoroughly decent human being.
Well, as the baseball pennant races turned for home,
and one that he could deal with, and it was just sad that the circumstances were such. And Pete is in a very difficult situation, because I'm sure at this point that a lot of people are trying to say, well, the commissioner of baseball is out, and now you may have the opportunity. That's not the way that Pete is looking at it. Pete understands that it is a very grievance time for his family, and he also wished to extend his sympathy to the family and all the people of baseball. And he is can't say enough how sorry this situation has occurred in his life, or in the lives of Bart Giamatti, and he hopes that all is concerned and all will understand that there are no hard feelings from Pete Rose.
Johnny, thank you very much for joining us here this evening. You know, on a personal note, the tragedy of Bart Giamatti's death is that for a man who so loved the game of baseball, when he finally became commissioner, his moments of enjoyment were so few and far between. And in order to truly honor his memory, we must not let the Pete Rose affair be his epitaph, rather his lifelong love for America's pastime. Earlier this summer, on the eve of the All-Star game out in Anaheim, we carried on a rather spirited debate about the designated hitter rule, which as a purist and a Renaissance man, he detested. His arguments, as always, were logical and reasoned, and his tone passionate, his words poetic. An educator at heart and a man of ideas, Bart Giamatti would certainly have taught all of us a lot more about ourselves, our society, and our national pastime. And what a terrible shame that we hardly got to know him when suddenly he is taken away from us. And to those who loved him most, his wife Toni and their 3 children, our heartfelt condolences.
They have a heart attack. Tonight, Pete Rose was contacted by reporters, and he's told them, quote, "I harbor no hard feelings. I'm sorry he passed away," unquote.
Only 51 years old, and he showed a lot of strength in the way he handled the Pete Rose affair. Unfortunately, the court battle with the Reds manager took its toll. Today, Giamatti suffered a massive heart attack and died.
The banishment for life of Pete Rose from baseball is the sad end of a sorry episode.
The sad end actually came today. After all the pressure of his 5-month investigation of alleged gambling by Cincinnati Reds manager Pete Rose, Baseball Commissioner A. Bartlett Giamatti succumbed to a severe heart attack this afternoon. Even while he was one of America's best-known scholars, Giamatti was writing about baseball and telling friends that his dream job would involve him in the game. The dream came true in 1986 when Giamatti was named president of baseball's National League. In April this year, he took over as baseball commissioner. owners of baseball teams were stunned by his death.
He was a deep man, a human man, and a man that dearly cared, not just being commissioner, but he cared about baseball. And next to his family and God, baseball was next. And it's all he ever wanted to be. And if there was a bright side to this whole thing, it was that he died doing what he wanted to do most.
The success of the Blue Jays has lifted the spirits of local sports fans, but it won't be long now before Harold...
Now to Bart Giamatti's death today at age 51.
He was a great person. He loved the game of baseball, and in a short time made a real contribution to the game, standing for the highest possible ethical standards. And then, of course, his contribution to higher education in this country is well known. And on top of all that, he was a thoroughly decent human being.
I personally was very proud to be associated with a guy that was the president of Yale University and have him involved in the baseball industry, the industry where you chew tobacco and you spit tobacco out, and this guy's in charge.
He gave of himself magnificently to Yale as teacher, as scholar, and as leader. This university will ever be a better place because of his service.
Here's a guy who's a real lover of baseball, a real fan of baseball. I'm sure he's going to be a tremendous commissioner. And now, before he even gets started, he's dead.
It's just a shocking bit of news, and just hurts baseball so much, because I believe that he was going to do a good job. Bart Giamatti loved baseball. He loved baseball more than he loved anything else.
And one more recollection and appreciation, really, from my ABC News colleague, Dick Schatt.
I first met Bart Giamatti almost 20 years ago at a party given at Yale by one of his fellow professors in the English department, Eric Siegel, who had just written a uranium mine of a novel called Love Story. I brought a Connecticut neighbor of mine named Tom Seaver to the party and introduced him to Siegel and to Bart Giamatti, and forgot completely about the meeting until several years later, when Giamatti, by then installed as the youngest president of Yale since the 1700s, wrote an article for the Atlantic Monthly about his passion for baseball. In the article, as I recall, Giamatti alluded to shaking Seaver's gifted right hand as one of the highlights of his own quite remarkable life. By the time I encountered Bart Giamatti again, he decided to give up the academic life and become president of baseball's National League, a career change which put him almost immediately in a very awkward position. He was president-designate of the National League, not yet in office, in October 1986, when the New York Mets represented the National League in the World Series against the Boston Red Sox, Giamatti's heroes from the earliest days of his New England childhood. After the sixth game, the game in which Bill Buckner's error permitted the Mets to come from behind for a dramatic victory, I happened to share an elevator with the president-designate of the National League. He was not happy that his league's team had won. He was not happy at all. He swore at Boston manager John McNamara's decision to leave Buckner at first base to commit the error which cost the Red Sox a chance to win the World Championship for the first time in Bart Giamatti's lifetime. He committed himself more completely to the National League when he officially took office in 1987. He loved his job, loved the ceremonies and the sights and the smells of the ballpark. Sometimes he seemed pompous and even arrogant, but I always felt it was just a blend of erudition and wit that intimidated those of us with less erudition and less wit. I enjoyed the shows he put on, the displays of quick thought and deft use of the English language. He handled himself well when he suspended the manager of the Cincinnati Reds, Pete Rose, for shoving an umpire in 1988, an incident that triggered a small fan rebellion at the ballpark. Giamatti acted decisively and strongly, but not too strongly. This year he moved up to commissioner, and he never really got a chance to enjoy this job as much as he had enjoyed being president of the National League. He did get to preside over one All-Star game. He saw Bo Jackson's prodigious home run that highlighted that game. He did get to witness Nolan Ryan's historic 5,000th strikeout. But so much of his time and energy was consumed by the Pete Rose investigation, the ugly scandal that threatened baseball's integrity as nothing since the Chicago Black Sox conspired to lose a World Series 70 years ago. Giamatti anguished during the investigation and acted strongly once again, eventually banning Rose for life. Giamatti lost many hours of sleep over the ruling, I'm sure, but he didn't lose his good taste and his good humor. I happened upon him a few weeks ago at a French restaurant on Martha's Vineyard, enjoying a brief respite from the Rose case and a hearty dinner with his family. When I saw him again, perhaps 10 days later in Dallas, where we had both gone to watch Nolan Ryan pitch, he assured me that the French Bistro was the best restaurant on the vineyard. He was in a good mood. Finally, he was participating in a happy occasion. And I said to him, as we waited once again for an elevator, "Did you teach Renaissance literature or the classics?" "Renaissance," he said. And I said, "I think I lose my bet." And he smiled and said, "Don't talk like that." His eyes lit up. Bart Giamatti lit up baseball with literacy and love during his too brief tenure. This is Dick Schaap for Nightline.
Dick Schaap will be back with us a little later in the broadcast, but first, when we return, we'll be joined by two of Bart Giamatti's friends and colleagues. From Major League Baseball, George Steinbrenner, and from the Commissioner's academic past, Professor George May.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Thompson's Water Seal Exterior Stain.
I stained this last year, and it's fading already. Why?
You didn't protect it with Thompson's Water Seal Stain.
Look at that cracking. Guess I used the wrong stain.
You did. Only Water Seal Stain contains Thompson's Water Seal. It seals water out, holds color in, for a freshly stained look year after year.
With Water Seal Stain, the next time won't be for a long time.
Thompson's Water Seal Stain. Beauty that lasts at last.
If you want to taste something truly sensational, just look for the NutraSweet Swirl. NutraSweet, why so many things taste so good.
When it comes to bagging your garbage, there's a best way.
Hefty, good sack.
And a second best way. A best way to close them.
Hefty, good sack.
And a second best way. A best way to open them up. And a second best. 'Cause there's a hefty cinch sack. And there's all the rest.
Hefty, good sack.
Why settle for second best when it could be a cinch?
Give your home originality tomorrow.
During our Labor Day weekend sale at Ridge Dining Furniture.
To reduce our overstocked inventory, we're slashing prices by up to 40% on select better quality dining rooms, dinettes, and kitchen sets.
From leading brand names like S-Ben, Donaire, and Richardson Brothers.
Save up to 40% with instant credit available.
Tomorrow at Ridge Dining Furniture.
Give your home originality. In Amherst.
And Lackawanna.
Ridge Dining Furniture.
Sunday, this week with David Brinkley, leads off a week-long focus on drugs. Secretary of Defense Cheney on the drug war in Colombia and its impact here. Sunday.
Joining us now are two of Bart Giamatti's friends, one from each of his two public domains. With us live from Tampa, Florida, is George Steinbrenner, owner of the New York Yankees baseball team. Mr. Steinbrenner spoke with Commissioner Giamatti over the telephone just 20 minutes before the fatal heart attack. And joining us live from our affiliate WTNH-TV in New Haven, Connecticut, is George May, Sterling Professor of French at Yale University. Professor May knew Bart Giamatti for some 20 years, as the two of them served together in various teaching and administrative posts at Yale. Let me ask both of you to change positions for a moment. Professor May, talk to me about the extraordinary love that your friend had for baseball. Were you conscious of it during the years that you and he served at Yale together?
Oh, yes, I was very conscious of it. It was a subject of bantering between him and me because he knew that I was totally ignorant about that game, and he thought that he should, because he was such a great teacher, educate me about it. But I must say that was probably the only failure in his life. He never succeeded.
Tell me a little about how he tried. Did he try to do it in terms of the symmetry of the game, the beauty of the game? How did he explain it to you? Because perhaps in understanding that, we'll understand a little of what he felt for the game.
My understanding is that his devotion to the game had a great deal to do with the fact that it is part of the American culture. And, of course, the fact that I was unfortunately not born in this country probably explains why I never could really learn enough about that game. But Bart really believed that it was part of America, that baseball was probably the national pastime. Everybody says that, but represented something deep about American culture.
George Steinbrenner, forgive me for interrupting you, Professor.
Not at all.
George Steinbrenner, take the other side of that equation, if you will. I don't mean to be offensive, but baseball is not commonly known, at least among its active ranks, as being a repository for academics, as being a repository for intellectuals. How did this man fit in? And tell me about how his background as an academic affected his work as commissioner of baseball.
That's a very interesting question, Ted, because when Bart first came to baseball, there were those in the community of baseball who wondered why this academician from Yale University. Having gone to school at Williams, a school near Yale, I understood Bart's love for education and his desire, and we joked a lot about that. But you had to understand this man. He was one of the truly great men that this nation will ever see, because he had such a profound effect on two of the major parts of Americana, as Professor May said, and of this country, education and baseball, both so important to our nation. And he was able to accomplish both in the highest manner, the highest degree, the highest proficiency. He wasn't with us very long in baseball as president of the National League before every one of us was in awe of Bart Giamatti for what he knew of baseball and the love that he gave to us and to baseball as a whole. You can say he gave the game dignity, he did. He gave it intelligence, he did. But most of all, he gave it love.
During the 5 months that he was commissioner of baseball, there was really only one incident that sort of dominated his relationship with the game, and that, of course, was the Pete Rose affair. How much did it take out of him, Mr. Steinbrenner?
I would hate to say that the Pete Rose, he never told me anything that other than that it was one of the problems he faced in baseball. I don't think the Rose incident had any real major effect. Sure, it was a burden on him. He admitted that, as were other things in baseball. There were many other problems that this man faced in baseball, as you well know, Ted, that would weigh heavily on any individual. But I talked to him, as you know, 20 minutes before it happened, and he was in great spirits. We laughed, we joked, and nothing would have ever suggested anything like this. I have never been in my life stunned as I was with this today. And I'm not a man that cries a lot, but I cried today.
Professor May, there is one characteristic that I gather he brought to both his professions, and that is a certain inner toughness. Would you talk about that for a moment?
Yes, he had that wonderful combination of toughness, but also of consideration for others, of the ability to see problems from the viewpoint of other people, and yet he had very strong convictions. I think his toughness had a great deal to do with his sense of duty, the clearness with which he saw what he had to do, what the standards were, for instance, the academic standards, and also, unfortunately, during his presidency at Yale, the financial problems that the university had to solve. And he kept these things clearly in his mind, and I think being convinced of the duties that he had, of the standard that he had to uphold, I think that had a great deal to do with that toughness.
Mr. Steinbrenner, the toughness that he brought to his two jobs in baseball.
He brought to baseball toughness, but fairness. As you know, all through the Rose incident, I was always supportive of the commissioner's right to make the decision that it belonged with Bart. He stood tall for in stature for the position of the commissioner, and yet he was a man that I feel was the most fair man as you'd ever want to find in all aspects. He was certainly suited to handle that situation and any other situation. He stood for fairness and righteousness, and he would have been a fair judge as the years went on, and in baseball and in the Rose incident.
We're going to take a break. When we return, we'll be rejoined by ABC News sports correspondent Dick Schaff.
When it's late and your productivity is falling off, you can splash a little water on your face, or better yet, revive with Vivarin. Government-appointed experts say it's safe and works, and all you need is 1 glass of water. So revive with Vivarin.
I took a twist for the better in my BVDs.
BVD brand underwear. Whatever you do, that extra comfort helps you do it better.
At my age, I've done just about everything in my BVDs.
Let's bring on our next challenger.
I always had AT&T until I went on this game show. I won $300 worth of free phone calls from this other long-distance company. I'm all excited. And then they hook us up. Took longer to get through. I couldn't call all the places I could with AT&T. Some prize. Took trying somebody else to appreciate AT&T.
Joining us now from our New York bureau is Dick Schaff, sports correspondent for ABC News, and himself a friend of Bart Giamatti. Dick, I guess the world is divided pretty evenly between those who would express bewilderment why anyone would want to be president of Yale University when they could be commissioner of baseball, and those who wonder why anyone would leave Yale University as its president to become commissioner of baseball. Why did he leave?
Well, he was fulfilling a dream, and there aren't many of us who can fulfill 2 dreams. He grew up in academics. His father was a professor, but he grew up in New England, cheering for the Red Sox, loving baseball, dreaming of being a player, not having the ability to be a player. Here was the next best thing. And as a child, he talked about being president of the American League. He ended up 1 step above that.
Why did he leave, though, when he left?
Well, I don't know the exact timing, but he had gone through a very difficult decade at Yale with the labor disputes and with the financial problems that Professor May mentioned. And he had discovered, I'm sure, that the academic life is not all as cheery as it has been portrayed in some films. And here was a chance to step into something that he had always dreamed about, and I don't see how he could possibly resist it.
Talk for a moment, and then I'll go to George Steinbrenner with the same question about what happens now to the job of baseball commissioner. I gather his deputy takes over for now, but what happens now?
Well, I think obviously Mr. Steinbrenner can answer this far better than I, but I'm sure they will have to start searching very soon for a commissioner. You know, I feel great sorrow for his family and sorrow for baseball, but I feel a great deal of sorrow for Bart Giamatti that he couldn't be here now to see this last month of the baseball season, which is going to be a great month after a brief tenure dominated by something as ugly as the Pete Rose incident. Here's one of the great pennant race seasons of all time. 13 teams still alive, including his Red Sox. I hope somehow he's getting a glimpse of it.
George Steinbrenner, pick up on that question that I asked, if you would. Baseball hasn't had a lot of commissioners over the last few years, and the 3 most recent ones have been very tough acts to follow.
Well, I agree with that. I think Dick's point about, somehow I feel like Dick does it, he'll be looking down on the World Series, and there'll be a smile on his face, that impish grin. The process in baseball is in good hands. Bart Giamatti saw to that. In the short time that he was commissioner, he brought on Fay Vincent, who I think has demonstrated his ability as a chief operating officer under Bart, who is his right-hand man, and I think that if Bart were here to pick his successor, it would be Fay Vincent. That's my personal opinion. I have great confidence in his ability to carry on the programs that Bart was just starting. And, you know, it isn't as though it was only 5 months. This man, as president of the National League, and then in the 5 months that he was commissioner, left a tremendous impact on the game. He had things organized. He was well on his way. And I think that baseball, as he used to say, the most resilient of all American traditions is baseball. Nothing can affect the game. The game is all, and Bart said it to us over and over and over again, and he made us understand that in the short time that he led us. And I think those very thoughts that he would express to us will carry us on and will carry baseball on.
Professor May, talk to us for a little bit, if you will, about the private man. For example, was he married? Did he have children?
Well, certainly he was married, and he had 3 children, and he was very much of a family man. He was very much of a private man as well as a very public man. He was a public man as president of Yale. He was a public man as commissioner of baseball, of course, but there also was the private side of Bart that some of his friends got to know, and especially, I'm sure, his family.
Hobbies, personal likes, dislikes?
In what respect? Of course he was a human being.
No,
very much of it.
No, I guess you missed the first word. I said hobbies. Did he even have time in his life for hobbies?
No, I don't. Baseball was his hobby when he was the president of Yale. And I suspect that poetry was his hobby when he was the commissioner of baseball, because the two, as somebody said earlier in the program, the two vocations, in a way, were deeply part of Bart.
Dick Schaap, tell us, if you would, some of your private recollections about him. You met him often? I mean, were you a close friend?
No, I certainly wouldn't say a close friend. I met him often. You had to in the nature of his job and in the nature of my job. But I had tremendous respect for him and for what everyone has mentioned, this love that he had for the game. His two predecessors, Bowie Kuhn and Peter Ueberroth, are both men with great abilities and with some flaws. But they never exuded the enthusiasm and the love for the game that he exuded. I mean, he cared passionately about things like the designated hitter, about the nuances of the game, and about the sheer excitement of the game. I never saw a man as angry as he was after the Red Sox lost that World Series game in 1986. He gave baseball a personality that it really needed and that I hope it can replace.
One of those from whom we heard a little bit earlier referred to the paradox here of having this polished academic in the world of chewing tobacco and spitting tobacco juice. How did that mix, Dick?
Well, there's always been a love affair between intellectuals and athletes, but it's been mostly a one-way love affair. And intellectuals like a world in which there are clear winners and losers, because so often they live in a world where there isn't, and therefore games like baseball attract them, and he was certainly not unique in that respect.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and we'll continue, that is to say, complete our conversation in just a moment. And we're back once again with George Steinbrenner. Mr. Steinbrenner, the Rose affair so dominated the 5 months of Bart Giamatti's tenure as Commissioner of Baseball that I have to raise this question. The resolution of this, did that in any way depend upon Giamatti Rose, or is that just a resolution that stands independent of it? In other words, can Pete Rose now expect in a year or so that his return to baseball might be easier than it would have been if Bart Giamatti was still Commissioner of Baseball?
I think one of the things that made Bart happiest was the preservation of the game, the rules of the game, and the role of the commissioner. I know he bore no ill will towards Pete Rose. He was a great admirer of Pete's. I don't know that it'll have any effect whatsoever, because if Fay Vincent would come next, he is Bart's image in many, many ways. I know it'll be fair. It deserves to be fair. If we could seize on one thing, one last thought to remember about this great man that was with us such a short time. To me, in baseball, it's the love that this man made all of us feel for the game of baseball. Every of these owners in this day of high-priced athletes, of agents, of arguments, of labor contracts, of television contracts, this man brought us to one common thing of baseball, which was the love for the game and the love for the sport and the love for the country. All of the things paled next to that quality that Bart gave to all of us in baseball.
Dick Schaap, in the short time that we have left, and if you would like to end it on an appreciation, that would be appropriate too, but just give me your thoughts too on whether the Pete Rose affair is now in any way changed.
I don't really think so. I think Giamatti would have leaned over backwards to be fair. I could never understand accusing him of animosity against Rose, because he loved the game so much and loved the superstars. So I think, if anything, it might be tougher for Rose, not easier. I mean, one thing that my final comment would be, I think that Bart Giamatti would find it so appropriate that we would have a French professor on to discuss his contributions to baseball. That would appeal to his broad interests and his love for the Divine Comedy.
Well, and it certainly appeals to us. So I thank that French professor, George May, George Steinbrenner, and you, Dick Schaap, all of you. Good of you to be with us. All next week, the broadcasts of ABC News will examine the crisis of drugs in America. This week-long focus entitled Drugs, A Plague Upon the Land begins Sunday on a special edition of This Week with David Brinkley. Guests include Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney, Speaker of the House Tom Foley, Senate Minority Leader Robert Dole, and the mayors of Los Angeles and Omaha, Nebraska. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Saturday.
The Reebok World Triathlon Competition is all about
Join us Monday, September 11th at 7:30 Eastern for the Reebok World Triathlon. It'll take your breath away.
Ahead on Sports Desk, the baseball world is shocked A. Bartlett Giamatti is dead. They called him Thrill Hill in the minors. Well, Allen says, I'll show you why in the majors. And Chris Everett looks for a milestone, victory number 100 at the U.S. Open.
Sports Desk with Michael Landsberg and Gino Reda.
Hello and welcome to this very special edition of the PSN Sports Desk. It's our 5th anniversary and a very special welcome to all first-time viewers. Unfortunately, we get off to a tragic start. A sad note as baseball loses a very, very key figure.
Really a shocking story. Somehow it all seems so unimportant right now. After all, when you strip everything away, it is just baseball, just a game. The commissioner of that game, A. Bartlett Giamatti, passed away on Friday. He was 51. Giamatti's life had been consumed with the Pete Rose situation. We'll never know what effect, what strain that had on his life, but we do know that he passed away of a heart attack. He was at his Summers home on Martha's Vineyard. Police were called in to his home on Friday afternoon. His heart had stopped. They administered CPR, but they could not revive him and bring him back to life. Giamatti took over baseball's top job on April the 1st, and while he was involved in many things, history will remember him as the man who banned Pete Rose from the game for life. That's the way history will remember him. Here's a sampling of the way others thought of A. Bartlett Giamatti.
Bart was a man of very much integrity, and he thought a lot of the game and what was good for the game, and he'll be greatly missed, I know, by baseball. And I got to know Bart pretty good. I used to kid him about his big words and so forth and so on, but he was a great guy, and I'm sure everybody's going to be in a state of shock over this. I know I am.
He was brilliant. He was compassionate. He cared for the game, and he cared for its people. And it just has left me dumbstruck.
He gave of himself magnificently to Yale as teacher, as scholar, and as leader. This university will ever be a better place because of his service. He will never be forgotten at this university.
He certainly was a man of principle and believed in total balance. He believed that we should be the best we could possibly be within the spirit of the rules, but at no time alter those rules. And education had to come first, but he also realized that athletics is an integral part of education for those that enjoyed it.
He was a fine person, a very intelligent man, and a man who has displayed some courage and real guts along the way in some decisions he's had to make in the short period that he served as president of the National League and commissioner of baseball, and he'll be sorely missed by everyone.
Bart Giamatti was a commissioner of baseball for just over 5 months. In that time, he was in the front row for Nolan Ryan's 5,000th career strikeout, and he was front and center in the Pete Rose ordeal. He will be remembered as a brilliant man, as well as a man who truly loved the sport of baseball.
Giamatti was born in Boston on April the 4th, 1938. He grew up wanting to play second base for the Red Sox, but instead, Giamatti got into teaching. He started out at Princeton University in 1964. He moved to Yale 2 years later. Giamatti has written a number of books, essays, and articles on baseball and Renaissance literature. In 1978, Giamatti became Yale's 19th president, a position which he held for 8 years. 3 years ago, Giamatti retired from Yale. He turned to baseball, where he was named president of the National League in 1986. He succeeded Peter Ueberroth as the commissioner of baseball on April the 1st of this year. And since that time, Giamatti has been soaked up in the National League spotlight with interviews and comments on the Pete Rose affair. That finally came to an end 8 days ago when Rose was banned for life from baseball.
The matter of Mr. Rose is now closed. It will be debated and discussed. Let no one think that it did not hurt baseball. That hurt will pass, however, as the great glory of the game asserts itself and a resilient institution goes forward. Let it also be clear that no individual, is superior to the game.
Bart Giamatti dead at the age of 51.
You know, when you hear the eulogies, the ones that mean very little to me are the ones that talk about his performance as a baseball commissioner and what he did at Yale University. The ones that really strike home are the people that say, here was a great man who really gave of himself to others, and clearly he seems to be that sort of man.
And a brilliant man. You can tell that by the number of books he's written. What's really disappointing in my mind is the sad fact that he went through the hard times and the tough tasks as the commissioner of baseball, but didn't get a chance to participate in one of the highlights of being a commissioner, and that's being able to award the World Series trophy, and that really is sad that he didn't get that
Interesting. People turned to Pete Rose. They wanted his reaction clearly, and he issued a statement through his lawyer, and he said that he was shocked and saddened by the death of Bart Giamatti, and even though they had had some problems clearly between them, that he had a great deal of respect for him. I guess most of that's somewhat predictable. He's not the kind of person, I mean, no one would ever say anything ill about a man who had just passed away.
Mm-hmm. And in the interim, until a replacement could be named, as an executive council has been formed to take over the duties of the commissioner of baseball.
Who says firing the manager in midseason doesn't work? The Blue Jays entered Friday's play, tied for first in the American League East, and is there a sole...
Test, find out on Goal to Go, taking the next step. Thursday at 7:30, only on Channel 2.
Ed Kilgore, Channel 2 News.
This is the NBC Television Network.
On this day after, the world of sports is still stunned by the death of baseball commissioner Bart Giamatti, who suffered a heart attack just 24 hours ago.
Bart Giamatti was a close friend of mine for many, many years. I do want to pay my respects. He was a great person. He loved the game of baseball, and in a short time made a real contribution to the game.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marv Albert in New York. Our Saturday baseball lineup includes the Mets and the Giants from San Francisco, the Indians and the Tigers from Detroit. But overshadowing what will take place on the field, the shocking death of Bart Giamatti at the age of 51. Now, within the hour, an autopsy was released that revealed that Giamatti had a previous heart attack and may not have known about it. The commissioner was looking forward to a weekend of relaxation with his family on the resort island of Martha's Vineyard, but he suffered the fatal heart attack and died 5 months to the day after becoming commissioner. Giamatti was different from his predecessors, not a lawyer nor a businessman. He was a Renaissance scholar, a baseball fan of the halls of Ivy, a Red Sox rooter who joked when he was named president of Yale, all I ever wanted to be was president of the American League. But in an odd twist of fate, in 1986, he was named president of the National League. And in April of this year, he replaced Peter Ueberroth as commissioner of baseball.
The times we're in now are times when you are really thinking, therefore, about affirming those strengths, but then providing continuity, providing some stability that people can count on and project into the future.
Well, I think he'll be the most beloved, and he's going to be an articulate leader of the game, and hopefully it'll be all the growth that's in the game now continue. But I think he's going to be a very special guy.
Pete Rose dominated Giamatti's 5 months in office as the two locked in a court battle over charges that Rose bet on baseball and on his own team. 9 days ago, they settled. Rose was banned for life. Giamatti stood tall. It was his finest hour.
The matter of Mr. Rose is now closed. It will be debated and discussed. Let no one think that it did not hurt baseball. That hurt will pass, however, as the great glory of the game asserts itself and the resilient institution goes forward. Let it also be clear that no individual is superior to the game.
At times, the pressure seemed to be off. He was able to make it to Texas to see Nolan Ryan strike out his 5,000th batter. And when the legal exercises were over, he could be a fan again, until yesterday. The man who often said that cigarette smoking was his most serious vice went to Martha's Vineyard for the weekend and suffered the heart attack that ended his life.
I used to tell Bart that if he didn't stop smoking, it was going to kill him, and I never thought that it was going to be that prophetic a statement.
He was a deep man, a human man, and a man that dearly cared, not just being commissioner, but he cared about baseball. And next to his family and God, baseball was next. And it's all he ever wanted to be. And if there was a bright side to this whole thing, it was that he died doing what he wanted to do most.
At the height of the Pete Rose controversy, at this year's All-Star game, I interviewed Bart Giamatti. For a relatively young man, he was only 51, the strain of the job showed on his face, and I wondered if he ever regretted leaving Yale for a career of hardball.
It isn't a question I ask in the sense of, oh my goodness, what am I in? I have a very strong sense of what I'm in, and therefore perhaps I ask it. Are you enjoying yourself? Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a great game.
Deputy Commissioner Fay Vincent was at Bart Giamatti's side during the course of that interview at the All-Star break. Fay Vincent was usually alongside his friend and associate, and he was there at Martha's Vineyard yesterday. Fay Vincent was the chairman and CEO of Columbia Pictures, an executive vice president of the Coca-Cola Company, and a partner in a New York law firm. He was named Deputy Commissioner of Baseball last October and has within the past 24 hours already received much support to eventually be chosen as the new commissioner. It's expected to be named interim commissioner within short time, perhaps later on this afternoon. And Fay joins us from his home in Greenwich, Connecticut. Fay, you accompanied the commissioner to Martha's Vineyard. Would you take us through the day? I know a difficult one for you.
Marv, we left Westchester Airport. We flew to Martha's Vineyard, as we had many times over the summer. I had a small plane which I chartered. Bart was in good shape. He seemed healthy. His spirits were good. We left him at Martha's Vineyard around noon, and I got a call from Dr. Bobby Brown around 4 o'clock saying that Bart had had a massive heart attack. It came as an enormous shock.
Were there any warning signs of a massive heart attack?
None to my recognition. I saw no sign other than a very fine, healthy, happy, delighted, vacationing fellow.
Now, he was a chain smoker, and he used to kid that that was his primary vice.
That's correct. He smoked heavily, and I think he'd made efforts to stop, but he was not successful.
Fay, it has been a stress-filled season, obviously preoccupied by the ongoing Pete Rose investigation. Were there signs that he was affected by that immense pressure?
I don't think so, Marv. He knew that this job involved pressure and challenges like the Rose one. He had endured such challenges at Yale. I saw no sign that he was affected in any extraordinary way by what he was doing. He loved the job. He liked these challenges. I do not believe the Rose matter had anything to do with the tragedy of his early death.
What is your role now? What is the timetable? I mentioned that it is expected that you will be named the interim commissioner later on today. How do you see things developing?
Marv, it's a fair question. It's difficult for me today. This is a terrifically tragic day for me. I lost a great friend. I lost a partner. And it's difficult to talk about the future. I think I will sit down with the owners because Bart would want that. But at the moment, I really don't know what the next step is. I would expect that the owners will ask me to serve as the interim commissioner, and I would be happy to do that. But that is entirely up to them, and it would be presumptuous of me to anticipate their decision.
What will you remember most about Bart Giamatti?
Well, I think I'll remember his enormous capacity to make friends. He was such a talented human being, and he found it challenging and exciting to get to know new people. He loved to talk. He said the best thing he did was to talk. And I guess I will remember him most because of that remarkable quality he had to make friends.
Fay, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Deputy Commissioner of Baseball, Fay Vincent. There are many who feel he will eventually be the next commissioner of baseball. When we come back, more on the untimely death of Bart Giamatti, we'll visit with one-time baseball commissioner Bowie Kuhn.
NBC Sports presents Major League Baseball, an inside look.
May we ask you to share in a few moments of silent prayer as we remember the Commissioner of Baseball, A. Bartlett Giamatti, who died this afternoon. We remember Dr. Giamatti with respect, affection, and love.
That's the scene in ballparks across America last night, paying tribute to Bart Giamatti. Bowie Kuhn was Commissioner of Baseball from 1969 through 1984, preceding Peter Ueberroth, who preceded Bart Giamatti. And Bowie has joined us from WNBC TV's Long Island Bureau in Melville. First of all, what are your recollections of Bart Giamatti?
Oh, Marv, I remember a guy, will always remember a guy, very bright, very articulate, eloquent, with a marvelous sense of humor and never-ending sense of humor and a deep affection for the game, respect for its traditions. I think that's the way I will think about Bart Giamatti.
Bowie, you may have heard the Deputy Commissioner, Fay Vincent, tell us moments ago that he felt Giamatti was not affected by the pressure of dealing with the Pete Rose decision. Now, you went through some difficult times, battles with Charlie Finley and George Steinbrenner, labor problems. How did the stress affect you?
I don't think the stress is a serious factor. Obviously, there's stress there. You grow used to it. It becomes part of your daily life. You accept it. You learn to live with it. I think Bart, both as a university president, a great university president, and as nationally president commissioner, I think he knew how to live with those things. And I don't think the stress of the Rose situation was a major factor with him.
Will Giamatti's legacy be strictly the tie-in with Pete Rose and the gambling investigation?
Well, obviously it's going to play an important part in how we think about him, but I think people should certainly remember Bart as a guy who loved the game, who had a grand, magnificent set of talents which a commissioner should have, and who struggled very well to protect the game's traditions and the game's integrity. I think that's the way people will think of Bart and should think of Bart.
What struck you as you followed the day-to-day events involving Giamatti and Rose? Now, I would think you had to be measuring it from a sense of how you might have reacted as commissioner.
Sure, of course I did. I felt for the fact that that Rose had gone to court, had taken the whole thing through a long, winding trail that it need not have gone through. Ultimately, Rose was bound to lose out. Ultimately, Giamatti would prevail. It was Giamatti's patience, fair-mindedness that kept striking me as I watched the process, but I was sorry it was drawn out as it was. I didn't think it was fair to Bart.
Now, there appears to be much support for the Deputy Commissioner, Fay Vincent, to take over. What is your reaction to Vincent?
Well, I can't say I know Fay very well. He certainly is a man with a good reputation. Baseball people seem to like him. I talk to baseball people all the time, and I know they do have a high regard for Fay.
What do you foresee as the biggest problem that the next commissioner will face?
I think dealing with the labor management situation. They're coming into collective bargaining soon. I think they're really going to miss Bart in that kind of role because he was a man who could have brought good balance to that situation. The next commissioner must know how to balance out those interests between the clubs and the players and not let it erupt into a strike or a stoppage of some kind.
Bowie, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Marv.
All right, former baseball commissioner Bowie Kuhn will be back in a moment. Head to the ballpark on this sad day for baseball.